Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video. That way, you'll always stay connected to our stories and never miss the next adventure. The Nexus Colosseum hung in orbit like a jewel of violence and bad decisions, glittering against the void where three solar systems met at their borders. Inside its transparent dome, because apparently someone thought watching people beat each other senseless was better with a view of infinite space. Representatives from 236 species gathered to watch the galaxy's most prestigious blood sport. Well, prestigious if you considered sanctioned brutality prestigious. Which, let's be honest, most of the galaxy absolutely did. The registration hall buzzed with the kind of energy that came from too many different atmospheric preferences crammed into one space. The air tasted like ozone and regret, filtered through scrubbers working overtime to keep everyone from suffocating on everyone else's preferred breathing mixture. Holographic displays flickered overhead, showing odds, match schedules, and promotional footage of previous champions doing what champions do best, turning opponents into cautionary tales. Orthnir, the registration officer, oozed across its desk with the enthusiasm of someone who'd processed 10,000 applications and found every single one tedious. Its slug-like body rippled with bioluminescent patterns that supposedly indicated mood, but mostly just looked like someone had spilled glow-stick fluid on sentient mucus. 4 eye stalks swiveled independently, scanning the datapad in front of it with the kind of bureaucratic disdain that transcended species. "Next," Orthnir gurgled, its translator converting the sound into something resembling Galactic standard. Emily stepped forward. She stood maybe 5.5 feet tall, give or take. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail that said she hadn't bothered with the intimidation hairdo most fighters favored. No spikes, no war paint, no ritual scarification. She wore simple athletic gear that looked comfortable rather than terrifying. To the dozens of species milling around the registration area, she looked like someone who'd wandered in from a gym and gotten lost, which, to be fair, wasn't entirely inaccurate. Orthnir's eye stalks focused on her with the coordination of someone trying not to laugh. "Species?" "Human," Emily said. The eye stalks quivered. Oh, this was going to be good. "Planet of origin?" "Earth. Sol system. 3rd planet." One of Orthnir's neighbors, a crystalline being that looked like ambulatory quartz, made a chittering sound that the translator helpfully rendered as laughter. The registration officer's bioluminescence shifted to what might have been amusement, or possibly indigestion. With slug aliens, it was hard to tell. "Let me understand this correctly," Orthnir said slowly, pulling up Earth's file on the holographic display. "You wish to register for the Galactic Combat Championship. You, a human." "That's generally what I am, yeah," Emily replied, with the kind of casual confidence that should have been a warning sign. Spoiler alert, it was absolutely a warning sign. Nobody noticed. The display showed Earth rotating in space, looking blue and green and utterly unremarkable. The data scrolling beside it painted a picture of a world that had no business producing combat athletes. Humans had no natural armor, no venomous capabilities, no enhanced strength proportional to body mass, no environmental adaptations worth mentioning. They were classified as a Category 5 species. Soft bodies, the galactic term for beings that were depressingly easy to kill. Orthnir's bioluminescence shifted through several colors. "Your species has no claws? Nope. No exoskeleton? Nope. No acid secretions? No electrical discharge? No thermal manipulation? No—" "We've got opposable thumbs," Emily offered helpfully. "And pretty good endurance." The slug alien made a wet sound that might have been a snort. "Endurance." And we're excellent at pattern recognition. I see. Orthnir tapped its datapad with one of its smaller tentacles, probably marking her application with whatever bureaucratic symbol meant hilarious waste of time. And you understand that this tournament operates under natural capability rules? No weapons, no armor, no technological enhancements, just whatever your species evolved with. Understood. And you still wish to proceed? Emily's smile could have meant anything. Absolutely. The registration area had gone quiet, which was impressive, considering it contained beings whose natural communication methods included ultrasonic screeching, subsonic rumbling, and interpretive bioluminescence. Everyone was watching the human girl with the kind of fascination usually reserved for someone about to do something monumentally stupid. Orthnir processed the application with the weary efficiency of someone who'd long since stopped questioning the galaxy's infinite capacity for poor judgment. Very well. Your preliminary match is scheduled for the day after tomorrow, station time. I should inform you that the medical staff is equipped to handle most forms of catastrophic injury. Though given your species' fragility, I recommend updating your next-of-kin information. Thanks for the concern, Emily said. Really warms the heart. Registration complete. Your opponent will be randomly assigned from the pool of first-round contenders. Try not to die too quickly. The crowd hates short matches. Emily took her credentials, a small holographic chip that flickered with her match details, and headed toward the exit. Behind her, the registration area erupted in conversation. The general consensus, delivered in a symphony of chirps, growls, and translated expletives, was that Earth had just sent someone to their death. In the viewing gallery overlooking the main arena, Grelmoth watched the registration feed, with the disinterest of someone who'd seen 1,000 challengers come and go. He stood 10 feet tall when he bothered standing, his hide the color of old stone, and twice as thick. Horns curled from his massive head in patterns that spoke of dominance battles won. His species, the Brutans from Bruticus Prime, had evolved as apex predators on a world where everything was either predator or prey, and the prey had long since gone extinct or gotten smart enough to leave the planet. 89 consecutive victories, 89 beings from 89 species, all of whom had thought they had what it took, all of whom had been wrong. "Human!" he rumbled to his manager, a nervous bird-like creature named Nictic, who handled publicity and match analytics. "What do we know?" Nictic's feathers ruffled as he pulled up Earth's data on his personal display. His species, the Chiric, were excellent at information processing, which made them natural journalists and terrible fighters. Not much, champion. Soft body species, minimal defensive capabilities. Their planet is barely mapped in galactic records. They only made contact with the greater community about 30 cycles ago. No combat traditions registered in the database. No notable warriors. No, so why is one here? Excellent question. Nictic's beak clicked nervously. Perhaps tourism? I understand some species enjoy visiting combat events even if they cannot participate. She registered to fight. Yes, well. The journalist's feathers flattened in what might have been a shrug. Statistically speaking, there's always someone who overestimates their capabilities. Last season we had that Glimnoth from Pacifica 9 who thought meditation could deflect kinetic force. You defeated him in 18 seconds. Gralmoth grunted. Foolishness, then. Almost certainly. The champion turned away from the viewing screen, dismissing the human from his thoughts entirely. When you'd been undefeated for 5 seasons, you learned not to waste mental energy on obvious mismatches. The real threats were the species bred for war, raised in high-gravity crucibles, evolved in ecosystems where weakness meant extinction. Humans didn't register on that scale. Nobody noticed that Emily hadn't looked nervous during registration. Nobody paid attention to the way she'd moved. Balanced, economical, efficient. Nobody wondered why someone from a soft-body species would travel across the galaxy to enter a tournament where the survival rate for new fighters hovered around 60%. The betting boards updated throughout the station. Emily's odds sat at 10,000 to 1. Bookmakers weren't even trying to hide their amusement. One enterprising Vorthian had set up a side bet. How many seconds would she last? The over-under sat at 45. In a dimly lit trading post near the station's commercial district, Rill studied the odds with the careful attention of someone who'd made their fortune noticing things other people missed. Rill's species, the Quenth, were natural statisticians. Their multiple brain lobes processed probability calculations the way humans breathed. They weren't fighters, weren't explorers, weren't particularly brave, but they were very, very good at math. And the math on this human didn't add up. Rill pulled up Earth's file for the 18th time, compound eyes scanning data most people had dismissed as irrelevant. Humans were persistence hunters, pursuit predators. They'd evolved to chase prey not by being faster or stronger, but by being too stubborn to stop. Their temperature regulation allowed sustained activity in conditions that would kill most species. Their joints provided mobility in multiple planes. Their brains processed tactical information at speeds that rivaled dedicated combat species. None of that would matter against someone like Growlmoth, obviously. The champion would crush her like everyone else. But first round? Against another newcomer? Rill made a small bet. Nothing substantial. Just enough to be interesting if the human survived longer than 45 seconds. Just enough to be fascinating if she won. The arena proper was a masterpiece of engineering and showmanship. The fighting floor could shift configurations, providing different terrain challenges. Environmental controls could simulate everything from methane storms to gravity wells. Seating surrounded the space in ascending tiers, accommodating species of every size and atmospheric requirement. Holographic displays ensured everyone had a perfect view, regardless of their seating position or visual spectrum. It was, in every sense, designed for spectacle. Emily stood in one of the prep rooms, running through her mental checklist. The room was sparse: a bench, a water dispenser, a medical station in case fighters wanted last-minute attention. Through the transparent wall, she could see the arena being configured for the next match. Some kind of rocky terrain, probably to favor whatever heavy worlder was about to demonstrate their superiority. She stretched, rolling her shoulders, feeling the familiar looseness that came from years of training. Montana seemed very far away. The mountains where she'd run ultras through elevation changes that would hospitalize most galactic species. The gym where Coach had put her through combinations until her hands bled and her legs forgot how to quit. The sparring sessions where the only rule was, keep moving or get dropped. The galaxy thought humans were soft. The galaxy was about to get an education. Outside, the crowd was filing in. Thousands of beings, hungry for violence, ready to watch newcomers prove themselves or get humiliated. The prelim matches were always popular, nothing like watching ambition collide with reality in real time. The announcer's voice boomed through the arena, translated into 200 different languages simultaneously. Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings of all categories, welcome to the Nexus Coliseum. Tonight, we begin the preliminary rounds of the Galactic Combat Championship, where warriors from across known space compete for glory, honor, and the title of Supreme Fighter. The crowd roared its approval in a cacophony that probably violated several noise ordinances. Our first match features a newcomer from the recently contacted world of Earth. Give a cautious welcome to the human, Emily. The applause was polite, tinged with curiosity and no small amount of amusement. Emily walked onto the arena floor, waving casually to the crowd like she was arriving at a party rather than a fight that could kill her. And her opponent, hailing from the cutting forests of Mantis Prime, a warrior whose species has dominated prelim rounds for 3 seasons, Jorthnak the Reaper. Now the crowd went wild. Jorthnak was known, proven. He stalked onto the floor with the predatory grace of something that had evolved to kill efficiently. 10 feet of chitinous nightmare, with blade arms that could slice through steel and compound eyes that tracked movement in spectrums Emily couldn't see. His carapace gleamed under the arena lights, green and black and absolutely lethal. They faced each other across 30 feet of arena floor. Jorthnak's mandibles clicked in what the translator rendered as laughter. A soft body. They sent me a soft body for my 20th victory. The matchmakers insult me. Emily just smiled. The referee, a floating sphere of energy that somehow conveyed authority, drifted to the center position. Standard rules apply. Fight until submission, incapacitation, or death. Use of natural abilities only. Medical intervention available upon request. Fighters ready? Jorthnak's blades scraped together, making a sound like knives being sharpened. Emily settled into her stance, weight balanced, hands loose. The referee's light flashed green, and the galaxy's education began. The thing about Jorthnak, and really about most species that had evolved as apex predators on worlds where evolution favored sharp edges and quick kills, was that he'd never had to pace himself. His species hunted in bursts. Ambush, strike, consume. 30 seconds of explosive violence followed by rest and digestion. It had worked beautifully on Mantis Prime for millions of months, right up until some of them decided to apply those same instincts to arena combat. Emily watched him come. He was fast. She'd give him that. Those blade arms whistled through the air with the kind of speed that came from hydraulic pressure and evolutionary optimization. The first strike would have disemboweled her if she'd been standing where he expected. She wasn't. The second would have taken her head off. Also, wasn't there. She moved economically, no wasted motion, letting his strikes pass through spaces she'd already vacated. Not running, that would come later if needed. Just controlling distance with the kind of footwork that came from 10,000 hours of drilling. Jorthnak's compound eyes tracked her, processing movement, recalculating. His mandibles clicked with increasing frustration. "Stand still," he hissed, translator, converting his irritation into something comprehensible. Emily didn't bother responding. Talking burned oxygen. In the stands, the crowd leaned forward. This wasn't going according to script. The human should have been bleeding by now, screaming, begging for medical intervention. Instead, she was making one of Mantis Prime's proven fighters look clumsy. Orthnir, watching from the registration office's viewing screen, felt its bioluminescence flicker with something approaching interest. The slug alien had processed thousands of applications, watched hundreds of matches, and developed a reliable sense for when something was about to go sideways. This had that feeling. Jorthnak pressed harder, blade arms creating a web of death that should have been inescapable. Emily slipped through it like water, and then, just for a heartbeat, she stopped retreating. Let one of those blade arms come closer than it should have. Close enough to draw a line across her shoulder, splitting fabric and skin. Blood welled, red and obvious against her pale skin. Jorthanak's eyes registered the hit, the confirmation that this soft body could be cut, could bleed, could be killed. His instincts, honed across evolutionary time, screamed, "Wounded prey, finish it." He lunged, committing fully to the strike that would end this embarrassment. Emily moved inside his reach. It happened faster than most of the crowd could process. One moment, Jorthanak was executing his killing blow. The next, Emily had his blade arm controlled at the joint, her body positioning leveraging her entire weight against the weakest point of his exoskeleton. She dropped her hips, turned, and used a technique that had been refined in training halls on Earth for centuries. A throw that worked on the principle that joints only bent certain ways, and exoskeletons didn't forgive mistakes. The sound of chitin cracking echoed through the arena. Jorthanak hit the ground hard, his blade arm twisted at an angle that made half the crowd wince. Emily maintained control, shifting her grip, applying pressure that threatened the other arm. The Mantis warrior thrashed, trying to use his superior strength, but she'd negated that advantage entirely. His leverage was gone, his speed was irrelevant, his natural weapons were trapped by his own body positioning. "Submission!" the referee's translated voice demanded. "Do you submit?" Jorthanak's mandibles clicked rapidly, the sound of pride warring with pain. Emily applied slightly more pressure. Something else in his carapace made a warning creak. "Submission," he hissed. The referee's light flashed red. Match concluded. Victory. Emily of Earth. The arena went silent, then erupted into noise. Emily released Jorthanak, stepped back, and helped him to his feet, which, in retrospect, probably confused him more than losing. His species didn't have a strong tradition of post-combat courtesy. She nodded once, then walked off the arena floor like she'd just finished a light workout. In the medical station, a Chirrut doctor examined her shoulder with professional efficiency. "The wound is superficial. Dermal layer only. I can seal it in moments." "Thanks," Emily said, watching the holographic display showing betting odds that were updating so fast they looked like digital seizures. 10,000 to 1 had become 5,000 to 1. Still ridiculous, but trending in interesting directions. The doctor applied a medical sealant that felt cold against her skin. "That was unexpected." "Was it?" "Your species' profile indicated minimal combat capability." Emily smiled. "Profiles can be misleading." What the profile didn't mention, what the galaxy's databases had completely failed to capture, was what humans actually trained for. Other species prepared for combat by honing their natural advantages. Brutons practiced charging attacks. Mantis species refined their blade work. Armored species learned to leverage their defensive capabilities. Humans, lacking obvious natural weapons, had gotten creative. They'd developed thousands of combat systems over tens of thousands of months. Wrestling that could control opponents 3 times their size. Striking arts that generated force through technique rather than raw strength. Grappling styles that turned joints into liability and size into a disadvantage. And they'd done all this while voluntarily pushing their bodies to limits that most species only hit when fleeing for their lives. Emily's training hadn't been unusual by Earth standards. She'd run mountains because she enjoyed it, trained multiple martial arts because they were interesting, and spent months teaching military personnel because the pay was good. On Earth, she was fit, competent, nothing special. The galaxy didn't have a reference point for that. Nick Tick watched the match replay for the 9th time, his feathers ruffled in agitation. The journalist prided himself on thorough research, but Earth's database entries were frustratingly sparse. Their planet had been surveyed, catalogued as a Category 5 world with soft-body inhabitants, and mostly ignored. Standard procedure for worlds without obvious strategic value. He pulled up everything available. Humans were pursuit predators. Okay, some species were. They had binocular vision, not uncommon. They could sweat, weird but not threatening. They processed tactical information quickly. Lots of species did. Nothing in the data explained what he'd just watched. Nikitic's claws tapped nervously on his datapad as he searched for anything about human combat traditions. The results were sparse. Something about martial arts, but no detailed analysis. References to military organizations, but no capability assessments. Mentions of competitive fighting, but dismissed as primitive by the initial survey team. He pulled up Emily's match statistics. Heart rate during the fight. Elevated, but not panicked. Breathing, controlled. Movement efficiency, extremely high. Injury, tolerance. She'd let herself get cut deliberately to create an opening. That last point made his feathers stand on end. What kind of species trained their fighters to accept injury as a tactical choice? The answer, which Nikitic would spend the next several rotations discovering, was the kind that had spent their entire evolutionary history as both predator and prey, learning to hunt and survive in an environment that offered no natural advantages beyond stubbornness and adaptation. Growlmoth, informed of the upset by his increasingly nervous manager, watched the match replay with more interest than he'd shown in seasons. Run her profile again. Champion, she's a soft body from... I can see what she is. Show me how she moves. The replay ran in slow motion. Growlmoth studied Emily's footwork, her distance management, her timing. She fought like someone who'd spent years studying opponents, learning to turn advantages into traps. The throw she'd used on Yorthnak was technically perfect. Minimal strength requirement, maximum efficiency. She's trained, he rumbled. Of course, but... No. The champion's voice carried the weight of someone who understood combat at a fundamental level. Not just trained. Trained by species that had to be good at fighting because they weren't naturally good at surviving. She's fought things stronger than her before. Nikitic's beak clicked nervously. You believe she's a threat? To me? No. But she'll reach the elimination rounds. Maybe further. Growlmoth turned away from the screen. Find out everything about human combat training. Everything. In the trading post, Rill reviewed the match data with the satisfaction of someone whose probability calculations had proven correct. The human hadn't just won, she'd won efficiently, using techniques that suggested formal training rather than natural ability. Interesting. Very interesting. Rill adjusted their betting position, placing considerably more credits on Emily's next match. The odds were still favorable, and the math was becoming clearer. This wasn't a tourist who'd gotten lucky. This was something the galaxy hadn't seen before. The question was, what exactly? Emily sat in her quarters, reviewing her own performance with the critical eye of someone who knew perfection was impossible, but improvement was mandatory. The shoulder cut had been calculated, but still bothered her. She'd let Jorthnak closer than intended. Sloppy. Coach would have made her run stadium stairs for that mistake. Her next match was in 2 rotations. The opponent would be randomly assigned, but she'd already studied the likely candidates. Another heavy worlder, probably. Or maybe something with ranged capabilities. Acid spitters, electric discharge, that sort of thing. She'd trained for all of it. The galaxy thought Earth was weak because humans had no claws, no armor, no obvious weapons. The galaxy hadn't considered that the scariest predators were the ones that learned to win. Anyway, the arena configuration for match 19 looked like someone had decided to test structural engineering through violence. Rocky outcroppings jutted from the floor at irregular intervals, creating sightline breaks and elevation changes. The environmental controls had dialed the gravity up 10%. Nothing dramatic, but enough to matter if you weren't paying attention. Emily's second opponent was already on the floor when she arrived, and he was exactly what she'd expected after studying the elimination bracket. Throngak stood maybe 6 feet tall, but most of that height was shell. His species, the Gorn from Shellback 9, had evolved in an environment where everything wanted to eat you, and the only successful survival strategy was being too annoying to bother with. His carapace gleamed like polished bronze, segments overlapping in patterns that had turned aside everything from claws to plasma fire. The bookmakers had him favored 3-1. Reasonable odds for a defensive specialist against a fighter whose only win had come from exploiting joint mechanics. "Human," Throngak's voice rumbled from somewhere inside his shell, translated into something resembling friendliness. "I watched your first match. Impressive technique. Unfortunately, I don't have joints you can manipulate." Emily studied him, head tilted. "Everyone has joints. Not ones you can reach." The referee drifted into position. Fighters ready? They were. The light flashed green. Throngak did what defensive specialists always did. Nothing. He settled into his shell, presenting an armored surface that could probably survive a direct meteor strike. The strategy was simple. Wait for the opponent to exhaust themselves, then capitalize on their mistakes. It had carried him through 8 matches so far. Emily circled, studying. The crowd murmured with anticipation, expecting the human to do something foolish like punch the shell or try to find a weak spot that didn't exist. Instead, she just moved, maintaining distance, observing. 15 seconds passed. 30. 60. The crowd's anticipation turned to confusion. Was this going to be one of those boring matches where nobody did anything? Some species started making sounds of displeasure, which the translators helpfully rendered as various forms of booing. Emily kept circling. Inside his shell, Throngak felt the first whisper of uncertainty. Defensive fighters understood patience. It was their entire strategy. But this human wasn't probing for weaknesses or showing frustration. She was just watching, learning, like she had all the time in the universe. Which, he realized with creeping discomfort, she probably did. The Gorn's evolutionary advantage was their shell. But that shell was heavy. Maintaining the defensive posture burned energy constantly. His species had adapted to survive in short bursts, retreat into the shell, wait out the threat, emerge when safe. Arena matches usually lasted 5 to 10 minutes, at most. He could maintain his defense that long easily. But what if the human didn't attack for 10 minutes? What if she just waited? At the 2-minute mark, Emily stopped circling and attacked. Not dramatically. Not with the kind of telegraphed strike that defensive fighters train to counter. She just moved in, threw a quick combination at his shell, testing strikes that accomplished nothing except making noise, then backed away before he could counter. Throngak tracked her movement, muscles tensed for the real attack that never came. She did it again 30 seconds later, and again, and again. Each time, he prepared to counter. Each time his muscles engaged, his body readying for the explosive movement that would turn defense into offense. Each time, she backed away before he could execute. In the stands, Rill watched with compound eyes that processed the pattern faster than most species could think. The human wasn't trying to hurt the Gorn. She was making him waste energy. Every preparation to counter was a muscle contraction. Every reset cost endurance. She was spending almost nothing while forcing him to spend everything. Fascinating, Rill murmured, mandibles clicking in appreciation. At the 5-minute mark, Throngak's shell felt heavier than it should. At 6 minutes, his breathing had shifted from controlled to labored. At 8 minutes, when Emily moved in for another testing strike, his counter came a half-second slower than it should have. She noticed. The next time she attacked, she didn't back away. She moved to his side, the angle where his shell protected him least, and started working the gap between his carapace segments. Not trying to break through, just applying constant pressure. Her hands found the joints where his neck met his shell, where his legs connected to his body. Places where even the best armor had to compromise for mobility. Throngak tried to shift position, but his body was already exhausted from 10 minutes of high-alert tension. His counter came slow and clumsy. Emily slipped it easily, maintaining her pressure on the vulnerable points. "Submission," the referee demanded. "I can still fight," Throngak wheezed. Emily increased pressure on his neck joint, not enough to cause damage, but enough to demonstrate she could if she wanted. The Gorn felt his shell, his species' greatest evolutionary achievement, become his prison. He couldn't move fast enough to escape her position, couldn't generate the force needed to throw her off. His advantages had become liabilities. "Submission," he gasped. The referee's light flashed red. "Victory, Emily of Earth." The crowd's reaction was louder this time. Not just surprise, recognition. This human was doing something none of them had seen before. She wasn't stronger or faster or more naturally equipped. She was just better at thinking 3 moves ahead and making her opponents beat themselves. The odds shifted again. Emily was now at 1,000 to 1 for the championship. Still absurd, but trending rapidly toward respect. Her third match came after 1 rotation of rest. The arena had been reconfigured again, this time with water features, pools and streams cutting across the fighting floor. The environmental controls maintained a humid atmosphere that made breathing feel like work. Perfect conditions for Gorniks. The eel-like alien slithered onto the arena floor with sinuous grace, his body easily 20 feet long, covered in mucus that glistened under the lights. His species, the Volt from Stormworld, generated electrical charges that could stun prey from 15 feet away. In water, that range doubled. He'd won 6 matches by simply staying in the pools and electrocuting anyone foolish enough to get close. The bookmakers had him favored 2 to 1. Ranged capability against a close combat specialist. Math said the eel would win. Math was about to get complicated. Emily studied the arena layout, while the referee explained rules she'd already memorized. The pools covered maybe 40% of the fighting floor, connected by streams that would conduct electricity beautifully. Dry ground formed islands between the water features. Interesting choice by the matchmakers. They clearly expected this to favor Gorniks. They weren't wrong. They just weren't completely right either. The light flashed green. Gorniks immediately dove into the largest pool, his body generating a visible aura of electrical discharge. The water lit up with crackling energy. He surfaced, eyes tracking Emily with predatory intelligence. "Your first 2 opponents were fools who let you control the engagement. I am not so foolish. Come into the water if you dare." Emily didn't respond. She moved to one of the dry islands, studying the water patterns. The pools were connected, but not uniformly. The streams flowed in specific directions, following the arena's subtle elevation changes. Where the water pooled, it would conduct his electricity perfectly. Where it flowed fast over rocks, less so. She waited. Gorinix watched her from his pool, generating intermittent discharges that lit the water like lightning. Afraid? Smart human. You could forfeit. Save yourself the pain. Emily moved to a different island, closer to the edge of his pool, but still safely out of range. She appeared to study the water, shifting position occasionally, never quite committing to anything. Inside the pool, Gorinix felt his first flicker of frustration. His electrical generation was powerful, but metabolically expensive. He couldn't maintain maximum output indefinitely. The human had to know that. Was she just going to wait him out like she'd done with the Gorn? He surged forward, breaching from the water to snap at her with jaws that could bite through metal. Emily backpedaled, letting him miss by inches. His momentum carried him halfway onto the dry ground before he retreated to the water. She'd made him waste energy on an attack that was never going to land. Gornix's eyes narrowed. This human fought like prey that had learned to hunt, always calculating, never emotional, endlessly patient. His species had evolved to ambush hunt in storm water, waiting for prey to make mistakes. But this human didn't make mistakes. She just made him work. At the 4-minute mark, Emily changed tactics. Instead of avoiding the water entirely, she started using the streams, the flowing sections where his electricity dispersed too quickly to be fully effective. She dashed through a stream, forcing him to relocate, burning his energy as he chased. When he generated a discharge, she was already on dry ground. She was herding him, away from the deep pools where he was strongest, toward the shallow streams where his advantages diminished. Every movement forced him to make decisions, burn energy, generate discharges that hit nothing. At 8 minutes, Gornix was breathing hard, his electrical aura flickering inconsistently. His species wasn't built for sustained combat. They were ambush specialists. This endurance game was killing him. Emily saw the opening and took it. She moved through a shallow stream while his charge was still recharging, closing the distance before he could generate another defense. Her hands found his body behind his head, where eels had muscles but no electrical organs. The grip was solid, controlling. "Submit, or I'll ensure you can't generate current for a month," she said quietly. Not threatening, just stating facts. Gornix felt his body, evolved for aquatic dominance, become useless against a species that had learned to hunt in every environment Earth offered. His submission came as a hiss of exhausted acceptance. 3 matches. 3 completely different opponents. 3 victories. The galaxy was starting to pay attention. The news feeds across the Nexus Coliseum had abandoned all pretense of dismissiveness. Nictic found himself hosting an emergency panel discussion with combat analysts from a dozen species, all trying to explain what they were watching. "She's not exceptional by combat standards," insisted a Brutan analyst, his stone-colored hide reflecting studio lights. "Her strikes lack power. Her speed is merely adequate. Her durability is... And yet, she's won 3 matches against proven fighters," Nictic interrupted, his feathers ruffled with the kind of agitation that came from being professionally wrong. "Explain that." "Luck," the Brutan said, but his conviction wavered. Rill, invited as a statistical expert, clicked mandibles in disagreement. "Not luck, strategy. She's fighting an entirely different match than her opponents expect. They prepare for combat. She prepares for exhaustion management and tactical exploitation." The panel dissolved into argument. Nobody wanted to admit what the data increasingly suggested, that humanity's lack of natural weapons had forced them to become unnaturally good at everything else. In his private suite, Gralmoth reviewed footage for the 30th time. His manager had compiled everything available on human combat training, which turned out to be simultaneously too much and not enough. Hundreds of fighting systems, thousands of competitive formats, millions of individuals who trained in combat disciplines for recreation rather than survival. Recreation. They fought for fun. She has a match record on Earth, Nick Tick reported nervously. Amateur level. Middling success. She's not even considered elite by their standards. Growlmoth's massive head turned slowly. Say that again. She's not their best. Not even close. She's just someone who stayed, active. The journalist's beak clicked with discomfort. According to her registration data, she's a fitness instructor. She teaches others to exercise. The champion was silent for a long moment. Then, find out about their military. Their what? They're warriors. They're actual fighters. If this is what their teachers can do, what can their soldiers do? Nick Tick's feathers went flat against his body. That was a terrifying question. The championship bracket had narrowed. 64 fighters had become 32, then 16, then 8. Emily had advanced through each round with the same methodical efficiency. A heavy worlder who relied on strength found his joints controlled. A speed-based fighter discovered endurance mattered more than velocity. A ranged specialist learned that environments could be manipulated. Now there were 4. Emily, Growlmoth, and 2 others who'd earned their positions through conventional dominance. A Krillian warrior named Morthax, who breathed fire, and a crystalline being called Rix, who could reshape his body into weapons. The matchmaking system, in its infinite wisdom, paired Emily against Morthax in the first semi-final. The arena configuration was neutral ground, flat, no environmental advantages, nowhere to hide. Just 2 fighters and the question of who was better. The Krillian stood 8 feet tall, scaled like a dragon from human mythology, with internal combustion chambers that could project flame hot enough to melt most metals. The odds had Emily at 5-1 underdog. Fire was hard to counter without equipment. Emily stepped onto the arena floor and immediately started moving. Not toward Morthax, perpendicular to him, circling at maximum range. The Krillian tracked her, confused. Most fighters either charged to close distance or maintained range for projectile combat. This human was just running in circles. Morthax unleashed a gout of flame. Emily was already elsewhere. He tried again, adjusting for her movement. She changed direction. His fire consumption was metabolically expensive. Each blast cost resources. She was making him waste them. "Stand still!" he roared, flame licking around his jaws. Emily kept running. Her breathing was controlled, measured. Her species had evolved to chase prey for hours. This was just jogging with extra steps. At the hour, 3-minute mark, Morthax's flames came shorter, less intense. At 5 minutes, his breathing had shifted from aggressive to labored. At 10 minutes, when Emily finally closed a distance, his fire came as weak puffs that couldn't threaten anyone. She controlled his neck with a rear position that kept her away from his jaws, applied pressure to his airway, and waited. Morthax tried to fight, but his muscles were exhausted from supporting his bulk while generating flames. His submission came as a strangled wheeze. The crowd went silent. Then exploded. Emily had reached the finals. The championship match was scheduled for the next rotation. Growlmoth spent the interim studying everything available on his opponent, which was frustratingly insufficient. Her tactics were clear: exhaust opponents, exploit weaknesses, maintain composure. But tactics only mattered if you had the physical capability to execute them. And Growlmoth had ended careers by simply walking through techniques that worked on lesser opponents. The arena was reconfigured to championship standard: maximum space, neutral environment, perfect visibility. Every seat was filled. The betting boards showed Gralmoth favored 3-1, which was closer odds than he'd faced in seasons. The galaxy was learning to respect the human. But respect didn't win fights. Emily entered to roaring applause. Gralmoth entered to something approaching reverence. 89 victories, 5 seasons undefeated. The greatest fighter the Colosseum had seen in generations. They faced each other across 50 feet of arena floor. "You've fought well," Gralmoth rumbled, his translator rendering genuine respect. "Better than anyone expected. But this ends here, human. I am not like your other opponents." Emily settled into her stance. "I know." The referee's light flashed green. Gralmoth moved first, and gods, he was fast for something his size. But he was also cautious, defensive, having learned from watching her other matches. He didn't rush in blindly. He advanced with control, cutting off angles, limiting her options. Emily let him. She moved, maintained distance, studied his patterns. He was strong, incredibly strong, fast enough, experienced enough to avoid the obvious mistakes her other opponents had made. But he was also breathing hard after 2 minutes. That was the thing about evolution. The Brutans had evolved as apex predators on a world with no competition. Their fights lasted seconds, maybe minutes at most. They'd never needed endurance because nothing survived their initial assault. Humanity had evolved running down prey that was faster, stronger, better armed. Sometimes the chase lasted hours, sometimes days. Humans had learned to keep moving when their bodies screamed to stop, because stopping meant starving. At 5 minutes, Gralmoth was noticeably slower. At 10 minutes, his attacks came with less precision. At 15 minutes, an unprecedented length for a championship match, his massive legs were trembling with exhaustion. Emily looked like she'd just started warming up. She pressed her advantage, not with power but with volume. Constant movement, constant pressure, never giving him a moment to recover. Every attack he mounted cost energy he couldn't spare. Every defensive position required muscles to fire that had already fired 1,000 times. At 18 minutes, Gralmoth's leg buckled slightly. Emily saw it, adjusted her attack pattern to exploit the weakness. At 22 minutes, his breathing was ragged, desperate. At 26 minutes, he couldn't lift his arms to defend properly. "Submission," the referee demanded. Gralmoth tried to answer, couldn't find the breath. His body, engineered by evolution to dominate through overwhelming force, had nothing left to give. He collapsed to one knee, then the other. "Medical intervention required," the referee announced. "Victory, Emily of Earth." The arena erupted in noise that probably registered on seismic monitors. Emily helped Gralmoth to his feet, or tried to. He was too heavy. Medical staff rushed in with anti-grav supports. The former champion managed to meet her eyes. "What are you?" "Human," she said simply. "Just human." The press conference afterward was chaos. Nick-Tick, feathers completely disheveled, asked the question the entire galaxy wanted answered. "How? Your species has no advantages, no natural weapons, nothing that should make you capable of this." Emily considered her answer carefully. Back on Earth, this is just called staying active. Running, training, learning different skills. Millions of people do it. It's just normal. But you defeated the champion. He's a great fighter. Best I've faced. But he trained for fights that end quickly. She paused, then added with a small smile, "You should see what our military can do." The comment landed like a bomb. Within hours, the Galactic Combat Commission had opened an investigation into whether humans were cybernetically enhanced. The investigation concluded they weren't. Humans were just like this naturally. The Commission then quietly updated several policy documents and began discussions about weight classes and endurance categories. Rill, now substantially wealthier from betting on every one of Emily's matches, reviewed the statistical data with satisfaction. The math had been clear from the beginning for anyone willing to look. Humans weren't exceptional at any single thing. They were just dangerously competent at everything that mattered when none of your natural advantages worked anymore. Emily returned to Earth 3 weeks later, championship medal in her bag, and resumed teaching fitness classes in Montana. When students asked about the galaxy, she smiled and said it was nice. When they asked if she'd go back, she shrugged. Maybe. The mountains here are better for running, though. Somewhere in the galaxy, military analysts were frantically updating their threat assessments on humanity. Somewhere else, the Nexus Coliseum was instituting new rules about endurance-based species. And somewhere in between, the galaxy was learning a lesson it should have known from the start. Never underestimate the species that conquered its own planet before reaching the stars, especially not the ones who do it for fun.